at the Circle Cinema here in Tulsa. We're pleased to have Mr. Carl Wright of Tulsa, who was in the Army and was a PFC in the 80th Division. Mr. Wright, thank you for joining us this evening.
Pleasure to be here.
And I just would like to ask you to tell us your story in your words.
All right. I was born in Chandler, Oklahoma. My grandfather came west from New York to get free land in Oklahoma at the run in Oklahoma, and graduated from Chandler High School. The war broke out. Pearl Harbor occurred during my senior year. I went to graduate from Chandler High School and went to Kemper Military School for 1 year before I joined the service, joining in Fort Sill. Went to Fort McClellan at San Anderson, Alabama, for basic training. And then I was in the ASTP program, which is the Army Specialized Training Program, where the Army was trying to create enough engineers to fill their needs. But we were sent to Texas A&M for 1 semester, and then it was decided that they needed more infantrymen, so I was sent with others to California, in Yuma, Arizona, where the 80th Division was just completing its desert maneuvers. Did a little side duty for the 80th right there before I reported for duty at Fort Dix in south of Trenton, New Jersey. We had great training there for about 2 months, and then went into Camp Kilmer as a staging point before we boarded the Queen Mary with the 80th Division. There were like 15,000 of us aboard, plus a medical unit on the top. I want to talk about the mess of our troops that were sick going on the crossing, but the Queen Mary was faster than any convoys, so it went into North Atlantic, which were rough waters. We ended up in Glasgow, and then the division was split up. My company was sent to Newton-le-Willows, where we bivouacked on a golf course, which is where we had a lot of training, ate a lot of fish and chips at the local fish and chip place, and then went south in rail cars with the windows blinds drawn so no one could tell where the troops were going or how many there were. Went to Southampton, and very soon boarded a ship that took us to Omaha, and we unloaded at Omaha Beach. We actually landed on Omaha on the day that St. Lo fell, so we missed any fighting on Omaha Beach. We were taken in and bivouacked for 1 night. General Patton came by. He didn't see us, but we saw him. And then we went over to near the Fillet Gap. I was trained in what they call INR, intelligence and reconnaissance. I was trained to do demolition work and work behind the German lines. I later told an officer what I was assigned to do, and he said, "Oh, you were a runner." And well, that's somewhat probably true, because it seemed like the company commander was running me all over the place. My first night on really duty, I was on an outpost, and I saw movement on the horizons, and we had those big walkie-talkies, and I had one, and I called back to the company, and I said, there are Germans coming over the hillside, be prepared. So they got prepared, and I got my rifle and hand grenades out beside the slit trench and waited for the attack. But lo and behold, as dawn broke, I discovered those were cows feeding on the hillside. From there, we went over to the fillet area, and as we came into the fillet area, we came under heavy attack. I dropped behind an apple tree, and the German machine gun was knocking bark off the tree just above my head. But having been up so long the night before, I immediately fell asleep. Soon the troops came after me and said, "Get up, we're going." And we didn't travel very far till we came to a German ammunition dump, and it was my duty to go in and defuse the booby traps. And after I did that, then our company followed me into this big German ammunition dump, and then all of a sudden a German tank returned to the ammunition dump, low on ammo, but with a lot of machine gun fire, and it started firing at us, and we were shooting at it with rifles, pistols, bazookas, and everything, but didn't have much effect. But he turned around and caught us in the rear, and so we started running toward a wooded area, yelling and screaming. Well, we got to the wooded area, and it was filled with Germans, and I don't know whether they were just ready to retire to surrender, but or whether it was our loud screaming that thought we were charging. But anyway, they surrendered. We took a few souvenirs off of them, and one of them I took was a handmade aluminum handle knife that I strapped to my leg and wore it the rest of the way across France. We went on south to Chartres there, and then started the march across France. We would get to a river, and the Germans would have destroyed the bridge, so we crossed as we could, and then some of the time we marched, some of the time we rode, but eventually Patton ran out of fuel, and we marched the rest of the way. At the point that we ran out of fuel, I noticed we were coming up one of those narrow tree-lined French roads, and a big charge went off to the side of the roads, and it was one of those dumbass heavy weapons company 88 millimeter soldiers that misfired. But anyway, there was a German that ran up and then up to the hillside, and I started shooting at him, and I think that was the first German I probably killed. We got into this little village, and my platoon lieutenant was Lieutenant Spohr, and myself and another were approached by a Frenchman who said there were Germans in a house there. So I shot into the house in the first floor, and then threw a hand grenade to go into the second floor, but it bounced off of the window, and so a few of us scattered to that hand grenade went off. Then we went in and couldn't find any Germans, and opened the cellar door, and there was the French family down there huddled and fearful, and we let them come out. That same night we traveled by foot till about 2 a.m. Oh, our feet were blistered. It was so bad that you hated to get up because your feet hurt so much. But anyway, we slept in this field about till about 2 a.m. and then we started out again. Eventually we came to Barley Deuce, which was a place where my dad served during World War I, and then on into the hillsides surrounding the Moselle River. And we started down this hill in this dark forest and went off to the left, and we were deployed in the woods there, and the company commander established his command post at the end of the woods, and he sent me back to the road to where we were supposed to get a load of shovels so we could dig ourselves in. Well, I wandered around those woods and finally slipped down a ravine, and my feet landed up on the commander's head. But he was very generous and just turned me around and set me back out that way. Finally found the shovels, but by that time it was too late in the night to start digging slit trenches or foxholes. And so the next morning we started down this hill, came to a vineyard and deployed in that vineyard for a while, and then we started in and kind of marched through the little town of Pont-à-Mousson. It was strange because it was so quiet. It was like they were not joyful that we were there to save them, but there were Germans standing all around to start shooting. And sure enough, we got into a factory area, and in one of the factory yards, the 88 started in on us, and they were going off all around us, and the Germans were pretty bad, but they mounted their 88s on their tanks, and I never saw any of their artillery. I'm sure they had some, but those 88s were not squeamish about firing at a person direct. And my buddy Mike Defendus and I found a culvert between the railroad track and the factory wall, and sure enough, one of those 88s shot through that wall, and I could reach up and put my hand in the hole, but it didn't go off. And we thanked the Belgians. The word was that the Belgians were producing the 88 shells, but were doing everything they could to sabotage the production.
So they were making like blanks, or?
Well, or so they wouldn't fire.
Okay.
And so this was one of those lucky ones. There was a canal running along there, and we dug into that canal the next day, and then we tried to cross the Moselle, but were forced back, and we waited a day or two, I don't remember how long. In the middle of one of the nights, on the hillside on the west side of the Moselle, the most god-awful artillery barrage you could imagine. It lit up the sky. It was like daylight. We later learned that they brought up corps artillery, which is all of the artillery in several regiments, maybe even the entire division, and it just really lit up the sky. And we started to try to cross the Moselle. The engineers put up pontoon bridge, at least one that I saw, but when I got to the one that I was to use, it had been destroyed. So they strung a cable across the river, and I hand walked this cable across the Moselle with my feet dangling in the water. When the troops got to the other side, we started up this long hill on the eastern shores of the Moselle, and got under all kinds of fire. In fact, our division general was killed while trying to climb that hill. I don't know how many troops we lost, but our platoon made it to the top without any fatalities. We got to the top, dug in. The Germans were in a wooded knoll in the end, and they gave us a lot of trouble. Our battalion commander tried to get them out of there by sending one company in, then another company in, and D company is a heavy weapons company, and they went in and were forced out and left their water-cooled machine gun in there. And so it came Company A's time to go in, and we were getting all kinds of flack. I grabbed my buddy Mike Defenders, another boy, and I said, we'll go around. And we came to a clearing, and I had seen all those John Wayne movies where you just zigzag across the clearing, and so I started zigzagging across, and the machine gun got me. I didn't realize it until I was spun around and looked down, and blood was rushing out of my arm. And about that time, I noticed two Germans over to my right. They started throwing hand grenades at me, and the German hand grenades are not too effective, and they blow up, but they kind of blow me up in the air too. And then they started shooting at me, and one bullet went through my hips, and then Mike came out to get me about that time and grabbed that knife that I'd taken off one of the first Germans I'd captured and threw it at the first one and stuck him in the eye. I penetrated his eye and killed him, and the other one raised his rifle to shoot Mike, and Mike ran toward it, and he got shot through the hand, but his forward motion was enough that he was able to grab the rifle away from the German, and he's still running toward Berlin. But we got back to our own lines then, and we got a shot of morphine and a tourniquet and ended up back in an aid station where I spent the next 3 years. That it?